Welcome to Capitol Forum. I'm your host, Jason Fitzpatrick. My guest today is Speaker of the House, Andy Tobin. Thank you for joining us, Mr.
Thank
Speaker.
you, Jason. Glad to be here.
A few months have gone by since your first full session as Speaker. How'd it go?
Well, I think it went exceptionally well. I mean, I'm very proud of this 50th legislature. I mean, we've been through some very difficult times here in Arizona, and I think we sat down and concentrated on what was the important conversation we were supposed to have. And I kind of relate that to the same conversation, Jason, you might have with your family or your business partner. And, you sit down and you take a pencil and a piece of paper and you start working on what is it we have to do to get better. And we had to make, and sometimes there was tough calls. And in our case, we had to make some tough decisions. But then when the time was right and we were starting to find our way out of the crisis, we were able to find our way into making better and more efficient investments, which is what I think this legislature has done.
How do you think having a supermajority affected what you just talked about?
Well, that's interesting because we never looked at overriding the governor or any of that. I think at the end of the day, the supermajority was a reflection on our public policy. I think what the public looked at is saying, well, wait a second, what our priority is that, we grow this economy, we get ourselves out of debt, we start we just talked before the interview started about, my kids, I have 5 kids, we don't want them to learn here and train here and then move off to another state. I mean, that's an awful lot of investment loss. So I think that the public clearly identified that, and we have districts before this redistricting process that took place that were clearly minority districts that we elected in both the House and the Senate. So I never really looked at having the supermajority as like a super monochrome of, this is what we're going to do. I looked at it as just a reflection that we were on the right path, that we were on the right track. And where we had come from and the spending ways that we were involved in earlier still has created a lot of the pressure that we now experience with our recovery, and that it includes our major debt.
Where are we as a state financially? I mean, you talked about the budget.
Yeah,
where are we now, and where do you see us going in the future?
Compared to where we were, having now been here for 6 years and having watched this process and having remembered those phone calls late at night saying we're not so sure we have payroll for state payroll, if you can imagine, I think we are light years ahead. I describe it as putting Band-Aids on a ship that was already sinking, and just getting it back up to the ocean, top, and then now I think we're trying to put some permanent fixtures to it and steer it right. And I think if you can imagine having had those phone calls and having had that cash flow issue where you're really not certain, to come to a place where now we have some money set aside for reserve. We are now in a third ongoing balanced budget, which is miraculous when you consider, because even at the times we were growing, we weren't balancing budgets. For heaven's sakes, we only did that, I think, 4 times in 11 years before. So I think the public recognized that. I think they saw it. And we've improved our credit rating. All these things that we were taking so many bows and arrows for or targeted us because of the reductions we were making. I think we stepped out and made some courageous choices. And right now, I think we're heading in the right direction, especially as we move forward with our job recovery.
And we see some home values increasing. That's always a good sign,
home values
sort of an indicator.
Fewer foreclosures. I spent 13 years in banking down here during the S&L crisis. I know what a foreclosure market is. This was much worse than that. And we're still not out of the woods there. But I think more importantly, when we sat around that table with that pencil and piece of paper, what we talked about is said, what's the fastest way for us to grow revenue and to balance our budget? Well, we knew we had to make reductions, but you can only go so far. You still have to make your mortgage payment at the end of the day. You still got to pay for your electric bill. You got to pay for food. And here we have to pay for education and workforce development. Here we have to go ahead and make sure that we're keeping our universities moving. Here we have to make sure our healthcare system is adequate. So those are where the priorities were. So as we're moving forward, we're like, okay, how do we now put that money back in the places that are now arguably, but in many cases clearly more efficient than what they were before, when you have to squeeze down and get the same or more work out of the same amount of dollars? I think that was clearly a difficult time, but it was an incredible exercise if you followed how a lot of these agencies are improving, and then to turn around and start reinvesting back in the things that we really needed most: the seriously mentally ill, the university system, our K-3 system. But none of those things can happen if you don't have people going back to work. And that was part of our priority: is let's get people back to work.
You're a rural lawmaker.
Yeah.
President of the Senate, Steve Pearce, also same district.
Same
How is
district.
that? How do you think that shapes policy in Arizona, having two people in the big chair from the same district?
Well, I think at the end, I'm also from here, so I spent my early days when I came to Arizona in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and I'm from New York City. Having a rancher like Steve Pearce clearly brings a new dynamic to it. Reminds me of when Speaker Flake was here, in that dynamic and that rural piece that was able to change or at least include in the topic, what about water? What about rural transportation? What about the rest of the state that's not within an hour's drive from here? And so I think clearly that those topics get raised. It's been difficult times for especially the rural communities. Anytime you have an economic meltdown, it hurts the rural areas more, and it takes them longer to recover. So I'm hoping, if you've watched some of the work that we've done with the Arizona Commerce Authority and their attentiveness to trying to make sure that we have competitive rural communities with their tax structure. We've literally moved the pendulum here in the West. Out of the 8 states in the West, we were ranked dead last several years ago. All of this at the same time when we're almost in bankruptcy, and now we're ranked 4th. That's in less than 3 years. That's a pretty incredible mark. When all of a sudden, you now are the state that has the most business startups in the nation, not 3rd, not 5th, not 10th in the nation. That sends a message that we're taking people off of the government system, which means not on our access system, not our unemployment system, and they're working for themselves. And I think that's what everybody at the end of the day wants. That in and of itself has been helping to drive more revenue to us, and that's where the surpluses are coming from in our current budgets. So I feel that while the rural piece has been very important for Senator Pearce and I think Arizona is only going to recover if we all recover together, and that means urban areas have to understand the needs in rural Arizona, and we need some help. And similarly, in the urban areas, they have to know that they can count on rural legislators to help appreciate what their needs are. And I think it's been going quite well. So, but as we move forward with this job market, from having lost 300,000 jobs from our peak, now we're projected to be almost halfway of those jobs lost by December of 2013. I mean, the recovery has been astounding, considering all the public policy that had to happen in a short period of time. But it took the whole state, so it took all of rural Arizona. I mean, you can't leave it on the sidelines, and we all work together, and I think that's what brought us back.
Well, it sounds like we're doing something right.
Well, I'm going to travel and tell everybody about what's going on here and what the truth is, and I know that for all the dollars that we had to take back, the reason we took them back was because we had no money, and yet we stretched out our dollars as far as we can take them. Right now, Arizona is spending almost $25 to $30 million a month in our interest debt. Those are the dollars that could easily be used for that infrastructure, maybe for that water infrastructure in the rural communities, certainly for our education system, certainly for our universities. And it's going to take us a long time to recover from that. And I think the faster we can get to those job numbers, the quicker that debt goes away, and the freer those dollars are that are now going to interest debt will become available to us in the form of how do we get back to where we were, and how do we improve on the infrastructure that helped grow our state. So I think things are going well. Most people don't want to know that we put $120 million back in the K-3 education. The media's not talking about it over the next 3 years. That's pretty incredible. You're not hearing that we're putting money in the University of Arizona Medical School right down here from us in downtown Phoenix, so we can keep our kids in our state. They can graduate from here and stay here. We put money into that. And you're not hearing the funding that we put back into the university system at ASU and NAU as well. So I think I mentioned the the great effort that we put in with the seriously mentally ill. But this problem is bigger because when you talk about stresses on our system, the stresses clearly become the federal government, the unknowns, what's coming our way. We had a reserve out almost $300 million over the next 2 years for national health care. And we're still not sure, nor are we getting a lot of answers from the feds what that really means going forward. It's a work in progress. If I pass a work in progress down here, they throw me out of office. So we have an awful lot of scrutiny as we're moving bills, but these pressures continue. The federal government cut out our TANF money. That's the temporary assist to needy families. It's over $30 million a year. Well, we put it all back. So I don't think the citizens are hearing those stories. They certainly heard those stories when we were reducing those items. They're not hearing about those stories as we're putting them back. Maybe if it bleeds, it leads is part true. But all those things happened. We reevaluated and made significant changes in CPS and helped additionally fund CPS. DPS having problems with law enforcement officers and not enough vehicles. We took care of those issues too. So there's a plethora of good news that's going on and reinvestments that we're making in a system that was clearly broken. And really the great Arizona recovery has begun. And I think people are starting to feel it, but not a lot of people are hearing that story. So I appreciate the opportunity today to kind of share those good news pieces with you.
Sure. What do you see going forward? We a couple of months from an election.
Yeah.
Don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but
Yeah.
assuming you're speaker again, what would you like to see happen in the next
Well,
session?
I think the answer is there's still an awful lot of work to do. I think there's an awful lot of work to do on debt. We have a workforce development program that we're waiting on anxiously with the community college system. They got together to talk about what does workforce development look like, what does that mean in Arizona, and how can we, the legislature, help them do that. You'll be seeing that come forward in the next session. I think as well as a lot of issues now are in the hands of the voters, whether it be forestry or whether it be how elections are held going forward, and so that's going to redirect how we're going to handle the session when we get there. But I think when I mentioned earlier in our interview that we raised the ship from the bottom of the floor and put those Band-Aids on it, I think it's important that number one, all our committees take a real good look at Arizona revised statutes, see what things we can take off of the books that are no longer viable, see if we can squeeze that book down a little bit. So I'll be asking every one of our chairmen to take a serious look at the title that they work, that they operate within, and see if there aren't, just some things that no longer apply here in Arizona. And so that's part of the process of trying to shrink government, but trying to make it more efficient as well. So we have a lot of new, bright, young minds here who have some incredible ideas as to how to move forward with our education, or vital in very restricted education dollars. And so I'm anxious to see where that takes us as well. And quite frankly, we still have an issue at the border that has just as much to do with our security as it relates to drug and human smuggling. And I think that's a big issue. We tried to address that out of the House here last year. Representative Frank Pratt ran an incredible bill that would have put money in DPS's hands to help. And I think we have to revisit that. There's still a lot of issues down there on the border with respect to that drug trafficking and the alarming number of folks who are losing their lives in our desert. So it's not like we're going to be short of issues going forward, but what I clearly will tell you is that we're not going backwards. The idea is to move this state forward, and there's a lot of big things that I think our state can be working on, whether it's Interstate 11, which is which would provide just a huge economic boom, which connects Metro Phoenix all the way to Las Vegas, and that is huge, I think, for our economy. So I think depending on how our water study comes out and whether or not there's a sales tax that gets approved or not is going to dictate whether there are going to be infrastructure dollars here immediately available for any of these programs. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Budgeting sounds like a very fluid process.
It's always a fluid process.
Redistricting just happened.
Oh, my favorite topic. Yeah.
There's a potential there may be some more Democrats in the mix.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to affect how things go forward, budgeting, the whole process?
Well, you know what? I came down here. I think there was 34 Republicans. Now there's 40 here in the House. So, clearly I think redistricting in its effort or at least their claimed effort from the commission to make districts more competitive didn't. I think, it's very obvious watching the races that are out there, which ones are really in play, which aren't very many. And so I guess most folks would conclude that the Democrats clearly controlled that process, and the likelihood is we'll have fewer Republicans. However, I wouldn't count on those Republicans going away anytime soon. I think truly, I know we chatted about this earlier. We had districts that are were 100% Democrat and by a lot that elected Republicans. And I think the answer is that we've been right on the right side of public policy for Arizonans, and I think that you're going to start seeing a lot of those surprises in this November election as well. So our door has always been open. The Democrats have voted no on just entirely on budget since Governor Napolitano went away. So I'm disappointed in that, especially with all the additional spending that we added back to this process. You think there could have been enough for at least one of them to join in and say, yes, I think it's good to have some of that money go to K3. I mean, let's face it, when the spending was going on and the credit rating was going down and the borrowing was going up, they were all voting yes. And when the tough choices had to happen, and they voted no. And even when we were trying to put money back, there were nowhere to be found. So my view is that my door continues to be open. How do we want to move Arizona forward? You're welcome at the table, but we're not waiting around very long. I think that we've proven that when you're in the majority, you're supposed to lead, and we intend to. So they're welcome to be part of the process. But you can't just come to the table with your ideas and thoughts. You have to come to the table with some solid factual basis for participation, and then you have to decide whether you're going to vote with us or not. You don't just get your stuff in the budget and then get to say no. You got to be on board or not. So, and my invitation is for nobody, would love to have a budget where everybody agrees with, more than the Speaker of the House. So they're more than welcome to participate in the process.
Speaker Tobin, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here. Appreciate it.